7-Eleven drops coinop. Nintendo disses Sega's rating system. And Commodore premieres the Amiga CD32. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Do-do-do-do-do. Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the home computer and video game industries of yesteryear. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, Alex.
Good to be here.
Yay! So, you're back from your honeymoon?
That's right.
Hawaii?
I am indeed. I am still vaguely tan, which, it's starting to fade. At my height, I was, I would describe moderate to fair tan. Now I'm vaguely tanned.
Uh-huh. So
wouldn't claim I was ever a bronze god, that's for sure.
More like a semi-ripe tomato.
No, I do tan. Despite my Caucasian disadvantages in life, I do tan rather than burn, as long as I put a little sunscreen on. But, yeah.
Okay, well, that is good. That is good. We've got plenty to get to, so... everybody, today we're going to be traveling back to August of 1993, and by that, of course, as everybody who is a longtime listener knows, we're using the cover dates of magazines and newspapers to place us there, so obviously the news happened at some time before that. It's a framing device. Please don't send me emails. You can also get in touch with us. All the contact information is down below in the show notes. And if you contribute to our wonderful Patreon, just $1 a month, you can get the video version of our very first segment, the 7 Minutes in Heaven, where our intrepid co-host must play a game that was reviewed in a publication dated August of 1993 for 7 minutes that they have never played before. We have some interesting options today. And, Alex, have you already decided what you want to play?
I can't decide whether I want to do Prince of Persia 2 or Final Fight CD. So I'm going to make you choose between those two.
Oh, between those two? Hell, you're killing me here. Do you have a joystick?
Not handy.
Damn, otherwise I'd say Walker. Because now that's an experience. You want to see what DMA Design was doing right before GTA?
Right.
You have to play Walker.
That's true.
But yes. And I was going to try to torture you with Chess Maniac 5,000,000,001. Or Yo-Jo, which is an interesting experiment. Hudson Soft tried to get into the European home computer market. It's a Hudson Soft game developed solely for home computers.
Huh.
And only released in Europe. So it is definitely an interesting one. They were teaming up with Factor 5. That's where they did the Amiga port of Bonk. And so it's coming out in that period. There's some interesting choices on here. But since we haven't decided yet, and we haven't recorded it yet, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, look behind the curtain, let's find out what you chose.
Sometime in 1992.
Hello, Mike Hager here.
Hee, Mr. Hager. So pleased to make your acquaintance. I believe you know who I am. Don't hang up. We have a little business proposition for you. Your daughter for your cooperation. And we'll throw in the regular monthly bonus to your salary we offered before.
What? What happened to Jessica? Who is this?
Not so fast, Mike. turn on your TV.
Welcome back, Alex, from your 7 Minutes in Heaven. So, for the uninitiated, how would you describe Final Fight CD based off of your 7 minutes with the game?
Well, Final Fight CD is a pretty darn faithful port of the classic Capcom beat-em-up game Final Fight, known for its large sprites, interesting environments, and cool bosses, all of which translate pretty well onto the Sega CD overall, with very few hitches. Of course, being a CD-ROM product, they had to add some voice acting in there as well that was not in the original, and let's say that they could have probably skipped the, I'm assuming, $5 that they paid a single person to do 4 not-so-great voices. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty faithful.
Cool. Now the color palette, of course, is a little bit dimmer than what you had on the arcade, but the real comparison here is with the Super NES game. Do you have all 3 of the characters?
You do have all 3 of the characters, and it's a 2-player game. Can't do a 3-player game, so that's one thing it's still missing from the original. But you can choose.
No, the original is always just 2 players. There's no 3-player version of Final Fight. No, fans created one for the 30th anniversary. No, it was always a 2-player game.
Okay. Well, then cut all of that. Yes, all 3 characters are in the game, and it is 2-player, as the good lords at Capcom intended.
So, would you say that the Genesis does what Nintendo don't?
It does in large part here, and the reason for that is as much as anything because the original Final Fight was a very early title. It may have even been a launch title in the U.S., and it was a very early title in Japan. And so it didn't have the cart size necessary to reproduce the game faithfully. I think if it had come out a couple of years later, or if Capcom had sprung for a larger cart size, that it probably would have been more of a fair fight. But as it is, the SNES version, it's 1 player only. It cuts out an entire stage. And I believe most of the time there's only 2 enemies on the screen at the same time as well. And so the stages go on longer because instead of being mobbed by a whole group of enemies, they come in like 2 at a time until you work through them all. So, in this case, Sega did do the better job. The animation feels a little janky on it, probably because of being streamed off the CD. Not that I was streaming it off a CD, but just back in the day. And the color palette's a little muted, and the sprites feel a little smaller, but on the whole, very faithful recreation.
Very cool. Would you recommend that people play it today?
Absolutely not. And the reason for that is because it is such a faithful recreation. In this modern day and age, we have MAME, and you can just go play the original. So I applaud them at this time. This would have been a great game to buy for your Sega CD. It would be a good killer app to help justify your Sega CD purchase, but it's really not necessary in the modern world when you can just go back to the original.
That is an amazingly succinct understanding, and also the same could have been said for the Amiga port, which was terrible. Okay. It looked great on screenshots, but yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. So now, the last stop we have to take before we turn on the time machine and head back to August of 1993 is to check in with our good friend Ethan in the Department of Corrections.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan, to the Department of Corrections. Yes, that is you. So,
the Department of Corrections himself.
Yes. So I guess we're doing July of 93 here. So,
wait.
Yeah. Whoa.
July of 93. Boy, I have to scroll up.
We're still missing July of 93. Yeah. Sorry.
Do it.
We haven't done July of 93 yet. There's also
okay.
Yeah.
We are now in the mode for July of 1993.
So, what did I get wrong?
Well, Carl, we can't start there, for we need the Alex comment. He's not here today, but
no.
He's here in spirit. July 1993. Alex, Doom did not actually run at 60 FPS back in the day. In fact, it was locked at 25 FPS.
Oh, really? That low?
So it's 20-something. The Doom, as smooth as it seemed once upon a time, in its original incarnation, did not actually run at the full resolution. It literally could not. It is locked. It is physics locked.
Very cool. Very cool.
And then they had to fix it with, then when the source code was out, people could fix that.
Gotcha. Was Doom 95 also still locked, or was that unlocked already?
Not a clue.
Cool.
I just know the original stuff. Never ask me about iterations. I know the things about the first one. Do not ask me how things changed over time. That is like that's like a separate segment of history, man. Like getting into patches and re-releases and all that stuff. You need dedicated people for that.
Okay, so no questions about Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
No.
Okay.
But now we can get into July 1993. Just 2 comments, Carl, but that means each cheek gets a slap.
Okay, hit me.
Firstly, the information superhighway, the fun colloquial term for how people thought of an interconnected future once upon a time, was not actually the internet by another name. The information superhighway was an entirely separate idea from the internet. It was this idea of like a set-top box under the TV and completely gated things controlled by companies. And I know you can say that that's what the internet is today, but not really not. There was absolutely no sense of like users kind of having a space to, propagate stuff on the internet. The information superhighway was just this idea like you could mail order stuff through, this phone connected thing, and you could get digital audio information. It was not a robust idea of the internet.
Oh no, I know. Yeah. It was going to be something. We all knew data was coming over the lines, but we didn't know exactly what the shape was going to be yet.
Because the thing about the internet and the World Wide Web is that it connected a whole bunch of different servers together that were already existing into a unified force. But that, again, is not what the information superhighway was supposed to be.
No, of course, yes. But that's what it became, and now it's all open, unless, of course, you're in one of the test markets where X is going to charge you $1 a year to be on it. Okay.
Lovely times. Mm-hmm. I mean, things change. This has not been the first time that people have charged for something that was previously free on the internet, Carl. Come on. Don't pretend to like that. Then
Information wants to be free, baby. Information wants to be free. Sorry.
The second piece of this is relating to the Tetris port to the NES. Bulletproof Software did not do the Tetris port to the NES. They did it to the Famicom. The Famicom version of Tetris was by Bulletproof Software, but the NES version of Tetris was done by Nintendo R&D 1.
Really? They're 2 separate games?
Yes.
Did not know that.
The Tetris is absolutely insane if you start looking at all the different versions and whatnot. And I mean, for each individual computer, I believe it has just entirely different programmers, and they're not even based on the same thing, like at all.
The 8-bit computer versions all have one thing in common. As far as I know, they were all programmed in Eastern Europe at the time, and they all still have if you push down on the joystick, the block just automatically appears at the bottom. They don't have the accelerated drop yet. But yes, if you want the coolest intro loading screen of any game of the 8-bit era, it's Tetris on the Commodore 64. It has nothing to do with Tetris, but it is so freaking cool looking. And that's all.
Also, a lot of people
Google it.
Also, a lot of people think that Bulletproof Software did the version on the Game Boy, but they did not. That is also Nintendo R&D 1.
Gotcha. Interesting. I wonder why they did a separate version for the NES. I mean, was there a technical
Because I think it was
or?
Nintendo publishing it at that point, and they didn't want to do BPS's version either because it was unsuitable, or they wanted parity with the Game Boy version or something like that.
Okay.
That would be my suspicion.
That's definitely going to be something I'm going to have to play right after this just to satisfy my own curiosity as to the differences.
But that will be it for July 1993.
You'd almost think I'm getting good at this.
Or Alex is getting better at catching you.
That's true. That's true. Okay, well, Ethan, as always, remember everybody, check out Ethan's awesome work. His video series that's been going up is absolutely amazing. Links in the show notes.
There's a new episode recently.
There you go. Links in the show notes. Definitely check it out. As always, Ethan, thank you for your service.
Bye.
Kid to point a gun at a television set.
Welcome back to August of 1993. Alex, what's our first story?
Well, you teased it already in the opener, but 7-Eleven moves away from games.
The U.S. convenience store mega chain 7-Eleven has announced that they will be phasing out coin-operated video games from their corporate-owned stores, and that franchises, especially those earning less than $1,000 a month from games, should also get rid of the games. A rumor has it, according to Operator Magazine Replay, that franchises in the Midwest have been told by corporate to remove all fighting-based games from their locations as an image improvement measure.
Yeah, and I think that's the real headline here, because at this point, it's really only the fighting games that are doing very well that could fit in a 7-Eleven. I mean, you have some of the racing games and whatnot, but you can't get those in a 7-Eleven. And this is just another sign of this creeping threat of regulation around these violent games and people becoming uncomfortable with these violent fighting games, it seems to me.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we're also talking 1993. There's an ever-increasing spat of gang violence and stuff, especially on the West Coast. I know Seattle is going through it at this point.
Yep.
And so I remember it's going to be a couple of years later, 1995. There's going to be a drive-by shooting in Ballard, a part of Seattle, and one of the big headlines is, what did the kids who did the drive-by do right afterwards? They went to an arcade and played some games.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing, too, and you know, David Craddock, the author, has done a great book. It's going to be the first in a trilogy on Mortal Kombat. And he wasn't just doing the history of the games, he was also doing the history of the communities around the game. So he was talking to players. And the thing that really set the fighting games like Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat apart is that even if you were something of a score chaser, you mostly kind of stayed in your general area and, set your high scores in your own local arcades. But with these fighting games, people were going outside of their territories, outside of their normal playing spaces to go find other good players to challenge and to beat on their own turf. And so they encourage, with the same time as this rise of gang violence, they're encouraging these young people to leave their territory for someone else's territory, which is kind of very fraught.
Well, also they're traveling around and it is competitive.
Yes.
I mean, we're away now from the visual violence of something like Final Fight, which is, let's face it, just as violent as a Street Fighter, maybe a little less violent than a Mortal Kombat.
Right.
But the human players are working together. And here it's all about kick the other guy's ass, do it as fast as possible, and literally that's devaluing the individual tokens put in by the player who got defeated. You're getting less time. I mean, the competitiveness is going to build more frustration in some people.
Especially then when you're bringing strangers into the mix, or even, sometimes maybe even a rival gang member, like seeking you out. It becomes another form of warfare, sometimes benign, sometimes just the kind of things kids do, but sometimes more serious. So I'm not saying that, yes, 7-Eleven is probably overreacting a little bit, but there is a little something there, even if their reaction is somewhat extreme to it, because David Craddock tells stories about kids, not necessarily gang affiliated, but walking into an arcade that isn't there, challenging the people there and risking getting their asses kicked. I mean, it was leading to this kind of fighting. It's not, it's not just all scare, panic, whatever. It's real.
Well, and if 7-Eleven is making this kind of decision on a corporate level, they've seen some kind of numbers. They've seen some kind of effect. Because, 7-Eleven has been like an iconic place to play video games for at least a decade or more at this point.
That's what I was going to say. This is the end of an era, really, in coinop. And, in fact, in Gaming Alexandria, where we frequent, somebody just posted an article that had been written recently that was, asking the question, like, was 7-Eleven the best arcade? And, of course, the answer is no, but that's not the point. The point is people remember, like there are core memories formed playing arcade video games in 7-Eleven. And so this is truly the end of an era.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And for the individual operators who don't own an arcade but have been putting these machines in these locations, the loss of convenience stores is going to really hurt them. It's going to put a lot of them out of business because, the bars scene is not going to make up for it, and there's less and less places where they can access the youth with
absolutely. And that's the thing. We tend to look back on the golden age of arcades, and we tend to think about shopping mall arcades and Aladdin's Castle and all of that kind of thing. Just that's like collectively what our nostalgic memories are. But the bread and butter for most of these operators was their street locations. That's where a lot of operators were making their money. There weren't really that many people involved in these big arcades. And so this decline of the street location is really the beginning of the massive kind of final downturn in the American coin-op industry that we're still feeling today. Obviously, there's still some coin-op going on, but it's at a low point, and this is really some of the start of that right here.
Oh, definitely. And the magazines, like I said, it comes out of Replay. They are feeling it. They talk. The tone of this news article is kind of dire.
Yeah,
but oh well.
And
talking about other fun podcasts.
Yeah, it's my job to do the transitions now. Carl, stay in your lane. But that's not the only trouble happening in the arcades, because Microprose shutters arcade division.
After a slew of losses and layoffs at the company as a whole and extremely disappointing performance of its 3 arcade titles, Microprose has shuttered its coinop division. Renaissance Sales and Service will take over existing maintenance and parts contracts for the coinop games F-15 Strike Eagle, Bots, and Tanks.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, this was always ill-conceived. I mean, this was coming. Sorry, I love Wild Bill, but this was always an ill-conceived venture.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, everybody go check out my interview with Wild Bill. He'll be the first one to admit it. And we've been covering this story for the last 2+ years since Microprose made the first announcement that they were going to get into arcades. And it was pretty obvious that this was going to end this way. Obviously, it's even harder because Microprose's bread and butter, computer games, is also not doing well for them right now. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Again, just go and check my Wild Bill interview. It gets emotional there.
And quite frankly, anytime you have a chance to listen to a Wild Bill interview, you listen to it. The guy is a phenomenal interview. I've interviewed him. Carl, of course, did a wonderful interview with him. You always listen to the Wild Bill interview when you get the chance.
Oh yeah, the guy is the consummate salesman.
Absolutely. So yeah, moving on to the other part of that trouble that the 7-Eleven article hinted at, we also have Hong Kong debating anti-violent game law.
The Hong Kong government is debating a measure that would ban violent video games from arcades and establish a policing force to enforce the laws. Violators could face a $100,000 fine.
Yep, it's creeping in. There's this growing feeling about violent games, and we've talked about before. We'll talk about it again. It may even be a very special episode at some point. Hint, hint, hint. But
it's not that we've already set a date, but we've already set a date. Okay.
But the audience is maturing. The games are maturing alongside the audience, and public perception amongst the older generations hasn't caught up to those trends and still think of these as things little kids are doing. And it becomes a very much think of the children kind of situation.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, they just don't understand that this is something that you could do as an adult. But then again, we've been covering for a couple of years now the perceptions of pinball in the 1940s and the way it was described by those that thought that it was going to corrupt the unemployed youth of America and all this good rot. It's the same idea. Obviously now the graphic violence of Mortal Kombat with the digitized imagery, and we will talk a little bit more about violence in video games today. Don't worry, that's still coming. But yeah, it is coming. Now, the one thing I do want to point out here, and maybe somebody can clarify this if they have a better source, the $100,000 quote from PlayMeter magazine did not clarify if that was Hong Kong dollars or US dollars. The exchange rate at the time was 7-1. So I have no idea which sum it was. Either which way, it's not pennies.
Absolutely. But don't think it's all doom and gloom in the coin-op industry. Not everyone's getting out, because in a perfect, ships passing in the night on the way to icebergs moment, as Microprose is getting out of coin-op, Elite enters coin-op.
UK game publisher Elite Systems has announced the formation of Elite of America, headed by coin-op vet Norman Evangelista. The company's goals are to establish a stronger presence in North America and continue to expand its development into advanced technologies, including coin-op.
That is just such a bizarre decision. Now, there is a trend starting here. In the coming couple of years, we're going to see Electronic Arts and Acclaim also try to enter the business. because the hits have come back to the arcade again. Like, you're getting massive hit games again in video for the first time in a long time, and then those are going on to be converted into home games and reaping a lot of success. And so there's this idea that's starting to permeate that once again, just as in days of yore, you need hot arcade games, coin-op games that you can translate into home games. But even with that trend beginning, I don't understand what a small UK publisher like Elite Systems thinks they are doing. I don't understand.
We can't forget Rare is trying the same thing around this time. Psygnosis a year or so earlier tried to port Lemmings to the arcade.
But in partnership. I mean, Lemmings was in partnership with Data East, and Rare's working with Nintendo.
No, but I mean, I'm not talking about Killer Instinct and stuff. I'm talking Rare's attempt to do Battletoads.
Battletoads, yeah, they did.
But that wasn't in conjunction with Nintendo, was it?
No, I don't think that one was with Nintendo. No. But at least they had experience in the arcade business, and so that makes some sense, because the Stampers came out of coin-op, and you have, and you know, with Lemmings, at least they were working with Data East, like, and just. But I don't understand why Elite Systems thought that they could just... I mean, maybe they were planning to license whatever they made to one of the existing factories as well. I don't know much about their dalliance with coin-op, but it just seems such a bizarre
move. It goes nowhere. They never actually produce a game. It doesn't actually go anywhere. But what I think is important here to realize about Elite made its bones in the home computer industry in Europe with arcade ports.
Absolutely. Capcom especially.
So it kind of makes sense that they would think, hey, we've got some level of expertise or at least name recognition in that space. But I think it's more just the fact that they're not getting any more ports. They're not getting any more licenses. They have to replace the game someplace. And if they just make an original title, nobody's going to buy into it. They kind of need to do the arcade game in order to do this. And if we look at Europe, there's a perfect example from Titus, which is Fire and Forget 2. Okay? The game that never was an arcade game, but on all the ads, they had a mocked up or modified version of Space Harriers depicted, a photo of a modified Space Harrier cab that was allegedly the Fire and Forget 2 cab. And that's how they sold it, that you were playing an arcade port. It's just, you've got to have the allure. You at least have to have the image of doing something in arcade.
No, as I said, there was definitely a movement towards that, and I can see that, but I still don't understand how the Wilcoxes thought that would ever in any way be successful for them.
Yeah. I've tried to contact Norman Evangelista and requested an interview. I haven't gotten a response yet, but I would love to hear from him.
That would be a great interview. That would be amazing.
Yeah, he's got some well, his background anyway. They're not kidding when you say he's a vet of the industry. He'd been all over the place. And did a whole bunch of stuff after that and is still active to this day. So this is why it would be a great interview to just get the full evolution of coin-op over the last 30 years. But, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, well.
But moving on to other things that are supposed to save the arcade industry, Wolfenstein goes VR.
Alternate World Technologies Reality Rocket Arcade VR System, that's a lot of nouns all at once, has acquired the right to bring Wolfenstein to its system. The sit-down or standing-up head-mounted VR helmet system will play just like the home game, aka without any kind of vertical motion.
I am honestly, did this ever get made? I am honestly not familiar with this.
Actually does get made. There's even going to be, they're going to also release, what was it called? Not Steve Blake. That sci-fi Wolfenstein engine game. Can't think of the name of it right now. something Blake, and I can't remember. Steve Blake's a good buddy of mine. That's why I'm getting it. Wolfenstein Engine Games, come on. Let's see. But yes, this does actually get made. Blake Stone. That's where I got it. Blake Stone.
Blake Stone.
Yeah. You don't have to remember it. It was basically just Wolfenstein with some aliens running around. They did do a couple of things to try to add a little bit more story elements to it, but that was it. Now, a buddy of mine actually did play this in an arcade in France.
Oh, wow.
Sometime in the early 90s or mid 90s with the Blake Stone software in it. And he said, yeah, it actually worked somewhat. You moved your head, you were there, but yeah, you couldn't move up or down. You basically had to make sure you always moved your head left to right because the engine couldn't do anything else.
Absolutely. That's wild. Yeah, not the most logical game to translate into VR. I mean, I understand why you'd want to because Wolfenstein's so popular, but yeah. Without mouse look, it's like, why?
Yeah, that's it's not really your full VR, but then again, all these VR systems that we've been talking about are so limited, or they're just sprite scaling tech and stuff like this, that you just kind of take it with a grain of salt. Then again, we've got VR to talk about yet today, so
absolutely. Moving on, a reminder that the arcade is not quite dead yet. Super Street Fighter II hits Japanese arcades.
The long-awaited Street Fighter III gets pushed back for yet another update to the existing World Warrior game, adding new characters and new stages.
So many Street Fighters. Yes, this would be the introduction of Cammy and DJ and Fei Long and whatever the Indian was named. Thunderhawk. Well, no, Thunderhawk's the Marvel character. I don't know. There are only so many offensive Native American stereotypes that get used in these kind of transmedia properties.
So sad, but so true. Yeah, so what's out in Japan, according to the reports, is just a beta version, or it's a demo version. It's not complete yet. But yeah, so we're getting Super Street Fighter 2. This just as the whole dual Christmas launches of Special Champion Edition for the Genesis and Turbo Edition for the Super NES are going to be coming out. So obviously, you know, the arcade operators will always be one step ahead of the home versions. And through the Special Champion Edition, basically, they're both turbo. And so the consoles will all have it. And by the time we get to the home ports of Super Street Fighter 2, they will come out for both the Genesis and the Super NES simultaneously. And all is good.
Yep. And meanwhile, Capcom is just trying to stay ahead. Is just trying to stay ahead of the bootleggers and the enhancement kit people. And that's why they keep returning to the Street Fighter 2 well instead of going on to Street Fighter 3, is there is just this ridiculous aftermarket in bootlegs and enhancements, and they feel they just have to keep coming out with something just a little bit better than what the illegal counterfeiters are coming out with to make sure that they keep control of the market for their own game.
Yeah, it's insane, but then again, the appetite for Street Fighter 2, like you just said, I mean, people are traveling from one place to the other to another just to find better players. It's an insatiable thing, and it's consuming coins at a speed that cooperative games from the past just never could.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenon. I mean, the interesting thing, and I've said this before, and I just like to bring it up, you know, the interesting thing is the arcade is actually in decline throughout this period. Like, a lot of the narrative for people that don't realize this is that, you know, Street Fighter 2 came along and then revitalized the arcade. And it's like, no, it actually peaked in 1989 for the second time. But what Street Fighter 2 did is it brought back hit syndrome. It was the first truly outsized hit that had existed since like Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man and Donkey Kong back in the early 80s. And yeah, the demand is just insatiable.
Yeah. And, oh well.
But that is not the only thing Capcom has a cooking in the arcades, because Capcom also gets TSR license.
Capcom has announced that they have gotten a license from TSR, makers of Dungeons & Dragons, to release a coin-operated game using the pen and paper game as a basis. Tower of Doom will premiere at Gen Con in August.
I like those games. Those games were fun.
I love those games.
Fantastic. And it was actually the American someone from the American branch actually, was like the main designer. I mean, they did the programming and art and everything back in Japan. And so they had someone that, really understood. He had to kind of go back and forth a little bit because just D&D was never as big in Japan. So the people working on them didn't necessarily understand what D&D was. And I think that was important, having that American designer to kind of keep them a little honest was important in capturing the essence of D&D in those games. A lot of fun.
Oh, tremendous. I mean, the multiple paths, the differences between the characters based on their classes, just the little hints of leveling up and stuff that are in the games. Both of the games, Tower of Doom and Shadows over Mystara, are awesome. And you can still get them on MAME with amazing network code. So I do recommend it. It's something that I pull out at least a couple times a year and play through them again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we will end our look at coinop with a story that is definitely near and dear to my heart. Arcade One brings arcade history to print.
Richard Bushell and Steve, and I'm going to kill this one, Gronowski, have released their book Arcade One, Illustrated Historical Guide to Arcade Machines, a guide to hundreds of arcade coin-op machines spanning a period of 100 years from the 1880s to the 1980s.
All of us that do this history, not so much of video games, but of coin-op, are standing in Dick Bushell's shadow. He didn't get everything right, but he was the first person really that combined an interest with the collection of a lot of resources in order to start trying to tell the history of these coin-operated games. I mean, there was him and there was Nick Costa, and that was about it. And unlike video games, there was just... I mean, it took a while for interest in video game history to get going too, but after it got going, it really got going. But there are still very few people that really care about like coin-op history outside of the video game context. And if it weren't for people like Bushell and Costa, we would have nothing. And Bushell unfortunately died way too soon. I mean, he wasn't young. I think he was in his 70s, but he died of cancer with his work unfinished. He had hoped to have like 5 arcade books and 5 pinball books or something like that. And Arcade One is the only arcade one that came out. Then he did Pinball One, and then he switched formats and did an Encyclopedia of Pinball Volume 1 and Volume 2, and then at that point died. He wrote some other things too, like collector's guides and whatnot. But I have a copy of the book. I mean, super rare. I didn't buy it. I got it through interlibrary loan and scanned it. But truly, we are in his debt. Not perfect, but did so much.
And you always need the pioneers who get it started. And then people like us come along and basically just do minor revisions on the pioneering work.
Absolutely. We stand on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly. And that's why we can see so far that there's even consoles in the distance.
And speaking of attempting to stand on the shoulders of giants, Atari announces Jaguar launch.
Oh, nice one. Atari revealed that they will launch a test market for their new $200 Jaguar console in New York in the fall, with a national rollout in 1994.
Oh, goody.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, now this is an announcement that's coming out of CES. And we're going to be looking at a couple of hardware stories, some of them from CES, some of them from other places. But it's not going to be a $200 machine at rollout. It's going to be a $250 machine. And the New York test market is more we don't have enough machines to sell it anyplace else.
Yeah.
If you're really interested in this, check out my Leonard Trammell interview where he goes into detail on this one. But yes, it's sad.
I've interviewed the head of manufacturing as well, Laurie Scott, who started out. He was the son of the founder of Radofen, so he started out with the Hong Kong company and was in charge of it during the time where they were doing video game consoles and the Aquarius computer, and then came and later on came to work for Jack at Atari. And of course, it's been manufactured by IBM because Jack, after all of his, the Japanese are coming, we must beat the Japanese, wasn't gonna manufacture a console, even though he had made his bones manufacturing in the Far East. He was insistent. He kind of saw the mood of the country with Japan bashing and everything, and decided that one of his selling points would be that this thing was entirely made in the US of A. And IBM had some spare capacity, so they were manufacturing at IBM of all places.
Yeah, that couldn't have been cheap. They're not going to do that forever or for long.
Nope.
As
won't be long. Won't be long till the infomercials start. Old Sam on late night television. But yeah, we'll have some more stories about Jaguar in subsequent episodes. Can't wait.
Oh, definitely.
Meanwhile,
let's do the math.
that standing on the shoulders of giant things continues as Commodore debuts CD32.
At a press event in Munich on June 30th, Commodore presented the CD32, a console version of the Amiga 1200 home computer.
Yep, I mean, this is we see all of the makers in Britain go through this. Commodore does it twice, once with the Amiga and once with the C64. Amstrad does it. In the 1980s and the very early 1990s, computers ruled the roost. And then finally, at the beginning of the 90s, the consoles from Nintendo and Sega finally started to break through, and those computer makers were like, oh shit, our market's going away, we need to pivot, and they made some very ill-conceived attempts to turn their computer hardwares into consoles, and this is an example of that.
Well, I mean, and this is where I can't say friend of the show, I haven't interviewed him or anything, but somebody that we have both had contact with, our good friend Mar over at the Digital Antiquarian.
Mm-hmm.
He actually makes the argument that the CD32 was the best decision Commodore ever made. The decision to do it.
Right.
And it was probably the best product they had released in many, many years. But obviously it fails for a variety of marketing reasons.
Yes.
It's also not helped by the fact that they're not allowed to import it into the United States because of a patent issue with the CD-ROM drive.
Yeah.
But when you consider the Amiga 1200's technology at the time.
Oh, sure.
In comparison with everything else, it should have at least had a chance.
Yeah, I agree the instinct wasn't horrible, but it was unrealistic for Commodore at this stage of its financial collapse, even though they were still doing fairly well in Europe, just the overall company's financial collapse. It was a bit unrealistic to think that they could mount a legitimate console challenge, even if the underlying hardware was somewhat sound.
Exactly. I mean, they could have done something. Name recognition Europe could have been something. And if they had been able to really capitalize on, like we mentioned, Hudson Soft is trying to get onto the Amiga. They're porting their stuff over. They're creating original games for it too. If they had just had those kind of relationships, but there was no way Commodore at this point was going to be able to do that. Just
absolutely
wasn't an option.
Absolutely. Now, turning our attention to Sega, Sega shows off VR at CES.
Sega's VR headset for the Genesis was shown off at CES together with the announcement of 4 titles for the system: Nuclear Rush, Matrix Runner, Iron Hammer, and Outlaw Racing. The device is expected to cost about $200.
Yeah, sure. $200 VR on a 16-bit console. That's going to work great in 1993.
Oh, yeah. Anybody who's ever played a vector-based game, or a polygon-based game, sorry, I correct myself. Polygon-based game on the Genesis knows that those 3 or 4 frames a second are not going to work well in VR.
No, definitely not.
Especially not without any kind of additional hardware. Now, we are getting previews this month of what virtual racing on the Genesis is going to look like with the extra math coprocessor on board,
right,
or whatever it was. But yeah, these games all seem to be a mixture of sprite scaling with some polygon structures, and yeah, it's not going to work out.
No.
And just as a side note, at the CES, they also show off the activator. So, hey, you can have your full VR experience, your helmet, the activator, and you won't need a controller anymore. It's great.
In the words of the immortal Bubsy, what could possibly go wrong?
Oh yeah, that's etched into your mind forever.
And speaking of Sega hardware launches, Sega launches Pico.
Pico, a console-like device that plugs into a TV and has book-shaped software, a handful of buttons, and a touchpad, was launched by Sega in Japan in June. The device is targeted at kids and allows them to interact with images on the screen and in the books. The retail price is $140, and 4 books are available at launch, with third parties like Bandai and ASCII apparently already signed up.
Yeah, now, in the West, the Pico feels like a quirky little failure, but in Japan, it was actually fairly popular with the kids. There's a generation in Japan that fondly remembers their Picos. And, of course, Tom Kalinske also thought it was an amazing idea, thought that this was incredible. And after he left Sega, he helped found Leapfrog, which was successful, basically doing the exact same kind of thing that Pico had been trying to do a couple of years before. So more influential than one would think.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it doesn't go out of production until, I think, 1999. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, no, this is a great little device. It's basically running on Genesis hardware. Mm-hmm. 68,000 processors, same graphics chips, everything else. And it's really an interesting idea for reinventing it. And also it's a great way to bring licenses in. The couple of books that they showed were all using some kind of anime or manga licenses.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting little footnote. I don't think we have much info on its development, even in Japanese. I could be wrong, but I would like to know more about where the idea came from, because it is a very interesting repurposing of the technology, not the kind of thing you see video game companies doing a lot. So, yeah,
unless,
it's pretty cool.
Of course, it's the CD32.
Oh, God.
Sorry.
Meanwhile, no, you're fine. Meanwhile, according to Trip Hawkins, we always have to put that in quotes, 3DO gains support.
Trip Hawkins' new console, which debuted at CES, is gaining more third-party support, with Spectrum Holobyte announcing support for the platform and the Sega CD through its new entertainment division, or NED. Microprose announcing CPU Bach by Sid Meier himself, and Virgin will be bringing an interactive movie version of Sylvester Stallone's Demolition Man to the new console.
I mean, it's easy to say you'll make a game for someone when you don't have to sign a binding contract saying that you need to provide a release or pay a penalty.
Yeah. I mean, well, the scary thing is, I mean, CPU Bach does come out.
It does,
and it is
yes.
Sid Meier doing it. Spectrum Holobyte puts a lot of money into their Star Trek Next Generation game that was supposed to be exclusive. I mean, the screenshots, they were spending a lot of money on pre-rendered imagery, which could not have been cheap at this point in time. Sylvester Stallone's Demolition Man on the 3DO, I can't remember, did that actually get released? Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, that actually does come out, and it's kind of a cluster. But, you know, it's... Some people are interested in developing for it. I mean, the main people are still obviously EA backing it.
Right.
But, you know, it's, yeah. There's just something about a $700 console that's going to have a hard time convincing people.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, very funny. Very, very funny.
But now let's check in at Trip Hawkins' old company, where it appears that EA reports big earnings.
Apparently, the bet on Genesis and Super NES games has paid off, with Electronic Arts showing a profit increase of 65% year over year, landing at $65 million.
Yeah, it's really no exaggeration to say that EA made Genesis and Genesis made EA. I mean, that was a very, very fruitful relationship that basically is what established EA is that big giant company that we know today. And, you know, there were a few other things. They made some smart pivots later on that kept them there. But that's really the start of EA, is being on the Genesis. EA as we know it today.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Electronic Arts was a relatively big fish in a small pond in computer software.
Yes.
Genesis just throws them into a whole different league. And, I mean, at this point, we've talked already beginning of the year about how they ditched EASN, and just the sports lineup is going to turn them into a juggernaut. And there's no going back at this point. It's just going to get bigger. Now, $65 million profit still doesn't sound like that much. And just as a comparison, we also get profit numbers from Nintendo, and their profit clocked in at $760 million.
Nintendo knows how to make some money.
Oh, hell yeah. Just ask anybody who's buying Mario Kart 8. How many years after it originally came out?
Good Lord. Yeah, no kidding. and you know, always cash rich. Like, they make all this money and they keep a lot of this money. You know, there was that big Microsoft document leak recently, and when Phil Spencer's talking about the utter pipe dream of buying Nintendo, one of the things he mentions that means that they'll probably never sell is that they're loaded with cash. And he could have made that same analysis in 1993 as in 2023. They've always been good at turning a profit, and they've always been good at keeping a lot of that profit on hand as cash, which is part of why they're always able to march to the beat of their own drum, even if their days of being the absolute market leader are generally, a few brief fad periods aside, behind them.
And also why they can weather a storm like the Wii U.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whereas other companies have to get it right all the time.
Cough, Sega, cough, cough.
You said it, not me.
Meanwhile, to keep those profits rolling in, Nintendo hikes cart prices.
Citing currency exchange fluctuations, Nintendo of America has announced a 20% hike in the price of carts incorporating new technology like the FX chip. So games currently costing $50 will go up to $60.
Yeah, this currency exchange fluctuation thing is a real thing, and I forget some of the details now from when I researched it all for my Genesis episode, but basically it goes back to Reagan in the mid-'80s. when there were lots of accusations of dumping of Japanese product and all of that. There were talks between the U.S. And Japan on various economic issues, and I forget what the exact deal was, but they came to some kind of deal about the yen relative to the dollar and regulating that, which had the consequence in the beginning of the 90s of really, really strengthening the yen, which for companies that relied on foreign exports, or in this case, purchasing parts from foreign places, led to real problems with just losing so much money in currency exchange. It's actually one of the things that killed Sega in this period, since so much of their business was in the US and Europe rather than Japan. So like this currency situation is real, and it's hitting Nintendo here, and in another year or so it's going to hit Sega in a particularly ugly way.
Oh, yeah. And it's also kind of interesting that this establishes that $60 game price ceiling, if you will, that in many regards is still with us today, 30 years later.
Sure, though, this ain't the ceiling, because we're going to see, I mean, I think Ocarina of Time was like $70, and
yeah, but those are going to be exceptional outliers.
Mm-hmm.
But
now, I mean, Sony's going to bring the price back down. It gets up to here, and then it falls back to 40, and then it starts rising again until we get to the current day.
That's true.
So it's not quite a straight line, but yeah, it's interesting to see that this is another example of $60 being. Even though we've had 30 years of inflation since, like psychologically, it seems like it's hard to increase the price past that $60 barrier, because, quite frankly, games today, and now we are starting to see $70 games. Like that's becoming more and more common. It's finally becoming accepted. But quite frankly, and this has nothing to do with whether you believe in capitalism or not, like games shouldn't still be $60. Part of the reason that there is so much monetization in other ways through collector's editions and DLC and all of this other stuff is that the $60 price point doesn't really cover the cost of games anymore. But there's just a psychological barrier to getting people to pay more than a certain amount for their games.
Yeah. And it just kind of was like, whew, because it must have been a hard nut to crack even at this time, going up to 60.
Yeah, but no, the Japanese companies that relied on export markets were truly getting eaten alive by this currency fluctuation that went back to this Reagan era trade deal.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess we're just going to have to start thinking smaller then.
You're doing it again. You're doing it again.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Why even have a co-host if you're going to be that way? No, that was a good transition. I like it. I'll allow it. In that vein, Bandai shows off portable SNES at Tokyo Game Show.
Bandai has shown off a new laptop-looking portable Super NES with a 4-inch LCD screen. The device would never make it to market, but was shown running at the show.
Yeah, that's an interesting, quirky little item that I don't really know much about.
Yeah, I did some breakdown. I did a little bit of a dive into it. There's actually video footage from the Tokyo Game Show showing this device. It kind of looks like a Turbo Duo. It's sort of a black box, but it's got a little screen, not centered, but on one side that you can flip down. Mm-hmm. And it's, as far as I can tell, just a straight-up Super Nintendo. I mean, it's just the Super Nintendo, and it'll run... I don't think it has a battery. I think it does have to be plugged in. Mm-hmm. But, yeah. This thing just goes to prototype. It does not get released. But they did show it off. It got written up in several of the magazines. It really seemed like people were excited about this prospect. We've talked about portable versions of consoles, including the NES and stuff before.
Sure.
Third parties have done. One thing I could not find a clear answer on was whether or not Bandai had an official license from Nintendo for this or not. It was this maybe Nintendo licensing it out, similar to the way that they had made a deal that they reneged on with Sony for the PlayStation. You know, because Sony's PlayStation was supposed to be able to play carts. It was going to be a standalone SNES. I'd love to find out from a Nintendo insider whether or not for a brief period, maybe 2 years before this, somebody at Nintendo thought it was a good idea to, you know, sub-license the tech that they were using.
And Nintendo insiders don't talk. They don't want to end up like Yokoi, Carl.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll be sleeping with a koi. That's what'll happen.
Yeah, right. No, I would like to as well. And there are a small number of Nintendo people that talk, like Satoru Okada, but fewer than at even some other Japanese game companies, sadly. Like all the Sega people will talk to you forever. But
yeah. They don't care. It's like, what are you going to do? Cancel Shenmue 3 a third time? No.
But the SNES is not the only system that is showing up in a new form as the NES gets a makeover.
Nintendo has announced a major redesign of the NES at CES. The now 8-year-old console will be getting a makeover, removing the old VCR-like loading mechanism with a top-loading one.
Yeah, my co-host Jeffrey has a top-loading NES.
Yeah? I mean, it brings it more in line with the original Famicom design. Obviously, it's not necessarily the most convenient thing for American NES cartridges, which are just these giant monster things then sticking out vertically. But it is definitely a cost-cutting measure to bring down the price and just give the machine a few more years of life. I mean, I remember seeing these things on store shelves for at least a couple of years.
Oh yeah. They were around for a little bit, for sure. But even though the redesigned NES was at CES, there were other things that were not. And GamePro, for one, laments the no-shows.
Despite many amazing new products being shown at CES, GamePro magazine laments that Street Fighter II for the Turbo Duo, Sonic for the Sega CD, and the Super NES CD player were all no-shows.
If you knew more about Sonic for the Sega CD, you wouldn't lament its no-show status.
Were you not impressed by more levels of the same game, but now on a CD?
Yeah.
As someone who never really cared about Sonic to begin with, yeah. I feel you. Yeah. Now, the lack of Street Fighter II for the Turbo graphics, that was kind of a big one because obviously everybody knows that it's either already out or coming out in Japan. Everybody has seen the previews of it. They know it looks awesome. Why is it not coming out in the States? What is the question there? And obviously, well, my pet peeve, the CD player for the Super NES, is again a no-show. Wonder why? Yeah. I mean, this is coming months and months after they announced that they bought the exclusive console rights to the Seventh Guest, which is getting rave reviews. You think that after paying all that money to cockblock another system that has a CD player from having the game, they'd want to do something with it.
You'd think.
Oh, well.
Yep. Moving on then to console software, Sega and Park Place launch sports labels.
Following the success of Electronic Arts' EA Sports label, both Sega and Park Place Productions have announced plans for their own overarching sports labels. Sega Sports will incorporate games such as Joe Montana Football and World Series Baseball, while Park Place, Scott Orr's production company that used to do the Madden console titles, will launch Sports Forum with an eye to make games for the 3DO.
I'm going to have to preempt our Department of Corrections here. Park Place was not Scott Orr's company. Now, Park Place did the first Genesis Madden game, and Scott Orr produced said game, and he had some history with the founders going back, but Park Place was not Scott Orr's company.
Okay. I for some reason I had him being in there. Is he still at EA at this point?
Yeah, he's still doing EA stuff. That's how he got involved with Madden. But Park Place, because he had GameStar, the sports company that was purchased by Activision, and then he was brought in to produce Madden. And Park Place did make Madden, but Park Place was Troy Linden and Michael Knox were the principals of Park Place.
Okay. Did they have any relationship with ABC Monday Night Football?
They did. That is why they were brought in to do Madden, because they had done the Data East. That was Data East, right? They did the Data East football game. ABC,
yeah, that was Data East, but wasn't that also Scott Orr's project?
Might have been.
He was the game design. He did the game design on that.
Yeah, but he was not. Park Place were the programmers. Like they all knew each other from that gig, and so when Scott Orr was brought in by EA to be a producer on Madden, brought in his Park Place buddies. So they were all involved with each other, but Park Place wasn't Orr's company. It was founded by Knox and Linden.
Okay, I think I get. I think I understand now where I went wrong. According to the Moby Games credits on ABC Monday Night Football, the game design is credited as Scott Orr, Season Ticket Productions, which is probably the company that was his at that time.
Exactly.
Okay.
That would make sense.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yep. So, not trying to put our Department of Corrections out of work, but giving a little helping hand to our overpopulated prison system there.
I greatly appreciate it. That was my bad. So, okay. Excellent. So, Sega's going to try to basically one-up EA. Now, if anybody goes back and listens to my interview with a guy who was in charge of Sega at the launch of the Genesis.
Michael Katz.
Thank you. Friend of the show, Michael Katz. The somewhat contentious development of John Madden Football and
Joe
Montana Football on the Genesis. Yeah, I mean, Sega wants a piece of this very, very lucrative pie, apparently. And Sega Sports is going to be with us for a little while, all the way up through the Dreamcast in one form or another. And Park Place's attempts to do sports titles for the 3DO will be less successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that ends up fragmenting and becoming the basis for Sony's sports companies.
Exactly.
And Sony San Diego kind of spins out of Park Place Productions. So interesting story there. And World Series Baseball, that was such a great baseball game. Sega did own baseball, not as lucrative as the football games, but World Series Baseball on the Genesis was fantastic. I played a lot of that.
Very cool. Yeah. As someone whose last baseball computer game experience was GameStar's baseball game for the C64.
Scott Orr's production company.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No. As a Commodore 64 player, GameStar was a name I was very familiar with.
Absolutely.
As a side note, before we move on, have you ever tried his Commodore 64 first-person perspective football game?
I have not. That sounds terrible.
It is. But it's definitely going to land on the 7 minutes in heaven. It's almost as bad as the 3D soccer game made by this Italian development company that's trying to use sprite scaling. It's terrible too. But oh well, okay.
Lovely. Meanwhile, checking in with the competition, Mario's Greatest Hits coming to SNES.
Nintendo has shown off the Mario Collection at Tokyo Game Show, which will feature remastered versions of Mario's NES/Famicom adventures on one SNES cart. The confusing history of Super Mario Bros. 2 will of course be addressed in both Japanese and American versions of the game and will be released just 1 month apart in both the US and Japan, a sign of the ever closer alignment of the markets.
Super Mario All-Stars is a fantastic product.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have that name yet. Like I said, it's just Mario Collection at this point.
Of course.
From the screenshots I was able to see, the menus and everything are already there as we would know it. And the fact that it is just the same games in a remastered version is, I mean, there's some real foresight going on here at Nintendo. This idea that we can milk these games forever.
Yeah, this is the first high-profile example. I mean, I'm sure there have been others before, but this is the first high-profile example of taking a hit or a series of hits from a previous console generation, gussying them up, and releasing them on the current console generation. And obviously, that is a really big industry today. Ask all those Final Fantasy VII fans.
Well, it's interesting because the first preview shots I've seen of Pirates Gold are also being published this month, and I think next month are already the reviews. So there's this air, I think, about that. Certain games from the past, from maybe 6-7 years before, can now be redone. New hardware platforms, and if the design was strong enough inherently, you can remake it. Mm-hmm. And I think, we're going to see quite a bit of that going forward. But yeah, it's a fun development, and in a world where each new system is not compatible with the last, it is a good way to keep the games alive.
Absolutely. And moving on to some Capcom news, it looks like Genesis gets Special Champion Edition.
Oh yeah, well, we kind of talked about it already, but the saga of Genesis Champion Edition continues. Last month, we discussed that the launch of the Genesis version of Street Fighter II Champion Edition, which had been reviewed by mags like Video Games and Computer Entertainment many months before, had been pushed back to December, coinciding with the launch of Street Fighter II Turbo on the Super NES. Now Capcom is saying that the game will be beefed up to 24 megs in size and include the extra moves and speed options from Turbo, plus some additional bells and whistles, as well as get a new moniker, Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition.
Because there aren't already enough versions of Street Fighter II. But yeah, throwing that out there at the same time Turbo's coming out. I know we already talked about this, but it's like, yeah, not a good move. I'm sure our good friend Nakayama, who is known to be a screamer, was doing some pretty intense screaming around this situation. Because,
oh, definitely.
Oh, boy.
Well, friend of the show, and you can keep track of this better than I can, the U.S. Capcom guy.
Joe Morici.
Joe Morici, yes. When we talked about it, his recollection was that they had a functioning game. It could have gone out on the market, and the word from Japan was, no, make it better. Let's spend some extra time. Let's beef it up. And ultimately, I mean, like I said before, the differences between Special Champion Edition and Turbo are really almost insignificant at this point. And I did do some very brief browsing through Street Fighter 2 forums where people are arguing over the differences and blah, blah, blah. You have to be a really hardcore, crazy Street Fighter fan to know what the differences are between those two home ports. But it's a way now for, it's not the same product, so Nintendo can't complain, you're launching the same product on both systems.
Right.
But at the same time, it's still offering both systems the same product. So, you know, good on them. Like I said, once Super comes out, it'll be the same on both platforms, so it doesn't matter. Absolutely.
In other Street Fighter news, STD makes Street Fighter 2 easier.
Yeah, you gotta love.
I don't know what syphilis has to do with the difficulty of video games, but I'll bite, Carl. Tell me about this.
It loosens the joints or something. Yeah, we're not going to go there. So, STD Entertainment, maker of joypads and peripherals, as well as the owner of one of the best company names ever, has announced the Program Pad, a new Super NES controller that allows players to store moves in memory to automate some aspects of fighting games like Street Fighter II and Fatal Fury. The system can store multiple moves from multiple games and features an LCD screen.
Making some macros.
Exactly. Now, I never used one of these myself, but, you know.
No, neither have I.
As someone who has never been able to pull off a Hadouken, this sounds great.
I try to avoid STDs, Carl. Just saying. My joypad does not need STD enhancement.
Oh, come on. You know, you waggle that joystick here, you waggle it there. It's just sooner or later you're going to have an STD.
Well, I'm sure by now your fans are completely outraged by this conversation, but they're not the only people outraged, as the UK is outraged at Night Trap.
My hat's off for that transition, sir. So, apparently Night Trap hate is strong in the UK, with Parliament even debating the issue and a wave of fear over violent games spreading, no doubt helped by Sega UK's love of controversy.
The British Parliament, always that canary in the coal mine. It was the same with Grand Theft Auto, where, of course, they paid someone in Parliament to do it, but yeah, I do think that that's part of it. I mean, because certainly Britain's no more prudish than the U.S., probably less prudish, but as a result of that, the marketing is often more aggressive in pushing in that kind of direction, and I think that's part of why the UK notices some of these things first. I'm sure that's got to be a part of it.
Yeah, and we already talked about how Toys R Us in the UK had already said, no, we're not carrying Night Trap, way before the controversy breaks out in the US, and we're still not at the height of that yet. So, yeah, I mean, they're just a little bit more incensed, I guess, by it. They're also... We have to remember, the Genesis is the first major console to really break through to the mainstream in the UK.
The Mega Drive. Don't call it the Genesis.
You're right. The Mega Drive. So they didn't go through the whole NES craze the way that the US did or Japan did. So this idea of, the kids playing in front of their television sets on a console, as opposed to, good old Uncle Clive Sinclair's computer, where they will learn valuable skills for the future while playing Manic Miner. This is a new phenomenon for them or relatively new phenomenon, that I think they're still processing a little bit.
Absolutely. But Sega's anticipated some of this. That's why they have a rating system now. And this month, Nintendo responds to Sega's rating system.
Nintendo has responded to the rating system we reported on last month that Sega has introduced by claiming that violent games would never make it to their systems, citing the edited fatalities in the upcoming home ports of Mortal Kombat as an example, while MK's publisher Acclaim responded that the game depicts monsters, reptiles, and thunder gods, so it's not realistic and therefore the violence can't harm anyone.
That's so easy to say, Nintendo, when you're not being outsold 3-1 on the biggest console game of the year.
Yeah. I wonder where that promise is going to be when Mortal Kombat 2 comes out.
Yeah. But this is that jockeying. Nintendo throughout this period, going back to the launch of the NES, has always put itself out there as the patriarchal company that we're going to make sure none of this filth or controversial stuff gets on our system so that everybody has a good time and everyone's happy. And it's no longer a market where they can entirely do that and still expect to do good in said market.
Well, and it's affecting a third party here. It's not their titles. Again, my interview with good old Mr. Fischbach about this, how he as representative of Acclaim dealt with Nintendo on this matter. Go check out the interview. It's just it was there. It needed to be done. The game was going to be what the game was going to be. It's a little weak sauce of them to say, well, it's all just not realistic, blah, blah, blah. Kano holding up a beating heart is Kano holding up a beating heart.
That spinal column looked pretty realistic for games of the time, when the head gets ripped off too. Yeah, I mean, let's we're not fooling anyone. It's definitely violent imagery. I mean, is that a problem? That's a whole nother debate, and believe me, that debate's coming. But yeah, it is a bit disingenuous to go this far in trying to disarm the critics.
Oh, definitely.
For sure.
Well, and it's a promise that, we'll never do it. Yeah, that's a promise you're not going to keep. But you're right. It's just simply disingenuous.
Absolutely. But meanwhile, in the realm of computer games, it is not just the cartoony violence people are worrying about, because move over violence, here comes sex.
A growing trend among computer games, especially with the rise of CD-ROMs, seems to be the adoption of sexually explicit game content. From hentai-inspired imports from Megatech, who brought us Cobra City, Metal and Lace, and soon Dragon Knight 3, to Mac gaming company Reactor, who were showing off their latest visual novel, Donna Matrix, a cyberpunk BDSM-inspired comic rendered fully in 3D, and a likewise 3D-rendered sequel to their first release, Virtual Valerie, titled Virtual Valerie 2.
Carl, you've been including a lot of stories here about the violence and music and sex on TV, and I have to wonder if this might not be coming to a head at some point in the near future.
It's almost as if there's something in the air, like. We are the video game newsroom time machine. It's as if this is showing up more and more in the news reports. And you might think that the people in the media think that this is something people out there in the readership may be interested in. It really is. I mean, there's more and more of these articles popping up everywhere. It's not just in the States. I mean, a lot of these. The U.S. magazines don't mention things like Virtual Valerie 2 or anything like this. You do get ads for the Megatech stuff. But the Virtual Valerie thing showed up in a German magazine, PC Player. Where they're going to be a little bit more open about talking about this type of stuff.
Sure. Plus, Germany's already banned all the ultra-violence, so they have nothing else to complain about but the sex.
Well, it's not even that they're complaining about it. They're
just saying it's on its way.
Pathetic.
Yeah.
Anybody who's ever played Virtual Valerie 2, it's a poor man's sex games. And if you're a Commodore 64 user out there, you know which game I'm talking about. And no, you did not own an original copy of it, but you had a copy of it. At some point, Alex, this will have to be a 7 Minutes in Heaven.
Oh, God.
The story behind that game is just awesome. Simply awesome. But, so it's getting there. Porn studio Vivid is also getting into the game with a variety of CD-ROM products, including a multimedia Karma Sutra and an upcoming branching movie called Night Watch.
Oh, goody. But do you know what makes all that violence and sex even more exciting?
No.
High quality sound. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You or Terminator or Lawnmower Man?
The invasion of the sound packs is upon us. Soon you will be able to bring clips from your favorite movies to your PC. First we have sound packs, but video packs with short clips from movies are also on the horizon. This will soon be followed by a flood of themed screensavers after the success of After Dark, a sequel to which was shown at CES.
We're in the multimedia age. I remember this was not an official sound pack, because I'm talking about a little later on when you could just, find clips of things wherever and install them. But for the longest time, my dad in Outlook had as his new email notification from Monty Python, the Holy Grail, the arrow, zoom, message for you, sir, from the guy that got shot. Concord, Eric Idle's character with the arrow in the Lancelot section.
I remember my Windows 95 machine. I created my own Blade Runner theme for Windows.
Oh, wow.
And when you emptied the trash bin, I had the sound clip. Is this an empathy test? So, yes, I remember it well. And I guess, what it really is showing is that CD-ROM is here. CD-ROM is still expensive, but it's clear that everybody is just looking, to get those bucks from the people who have spent the money for the CD-ROM player, want to show it off to their friends, and this is the way to do it.
Right, and it shows that we are just about to reach a tipping point as well, because this is even more frivolous than most of the CD-ROM software that has appeared so far. And the fact that there are companies that now think they can get away with selling this kind of stuff means that their projections are telling them that CD-ROM is about to truly hit the mass market. And indeed, CD-ROM is at this time in the process of hitting the mass market. Seventh Guest has come out a few months ago and has started driving sales, and it's getting to be an exciting period for CD-ROM. Myst, of course, on the Mac. It's all coming.
Yeah, and let's not forget Night Watch. We all remember playing Night Watch.
Oh, yes, I'm sure we do.
I actually had to look it up. I believe there's even a Night Watch 2. And, these are not cinematic masterpieces.
Yep.
But it's Vivid, so, anybody who knows about the porn industry will know that if you're looking for the high-budget, big production porn movies of this era or any era after this, Vivid is one of the two big companies in that field. So, them having the budget to be able to pull something like this off is not unrealistic. And we've already talked about how the German porn company Orlowski was trying to do a point-and-click adventure game and also ends up releasing some CD-ROM based porn software. So, it's in the air that if you got the money to spend on a CD-ROM player, you're probably not some little kid. You are probably an adult, and let's do this.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, in other realms of computer hardware, PowerPC promises to decouple CPUs from OSs.
Byte Magazine dedicated a bunch of space this month to the PowerPC, the new RISC processor developed in conjunction between IBM, Apple, and Motorola. The new system is being heralded as a true cross-platform solution that will run most common OSs, breaking the traditional need to choose an OS based on the hardware one buys. The reality that the PowerPC will require an emulation layer to run DOS or Windows means that a big hurdle to creating this new universal standard, despite several companies, including IBM, announcing such emulators, remains a big question hovering over the chip's head.
Yes, really what that headline should say is PowerPC promises to decouple Intel processors from Microsoft Windows, DOS/Windows OSs, because, of course, this is the also-rans all getting together to try once again to crack that almighty Wintel alliance that has come to dominate the field of personal computers.
Yeah, and it's reading through the articles, and Byte really has a lot of pages dedicated to this month. There are no functioning emulators yet. So the chip is going to come out. Computers running the chip are going to come out. And the biggest selling point is there will be an emulator. Trust us, there's going to be an emulator. And, it's just kind of sad and pathetic. This also comes as this month, Byte is also reviewing the x86 port of Next Step. That's the operating system coming out of the Next company from Steve Jobs, which has been hitting hard times. And so they finally broken down and they've made an Intel-compatible port. It would have been inconceivable just 2 years earlier. But, the misfortunes of Next are just too great, and this is their last-ditch hope to save the company.
Absolutely. However, the PowerPC story has a happier ending than one might think, because even though it ends up being a complete failure in carving out a niche in the personal computer space, it has a very successful life in video game consoles as variations of Power.
Pippin.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, that is also a failure. But variations, customized versions of PowerPC technology appear in the GameCube, the Xbox 360, the Wii, the PS3, and the Wii U.
This is very true. That CPU does get some mileage. The structure gets some mileage. And I mean, it doesn't do what they want it to do. I mean, just like Steve Jobs' plan for the Mac was not to create a machine that's going to do desktop publishing. But the tech will take you into unexpected territories.
Absolutely. But the Wintel Alliance is not sitting still for this latest attack, as Microsoft and Compaq join forces for Plug and Play.
Operating system juggernaut Microsoft has teamed up with PC clone pioneer Compaq to create a new hardware standard called Plug and Play that will make it easier for users of Wintel machines to add and change out hardware.
Let me tell you, if you didn't grow up in the era before Plug and Play hardware, you have no idea. You have no idea what putting new hardware into your computer used to be like.
Well, I was an Amiga user, so for me it was open up a panel on the bottom, plug in the cartridge. We had Plug and Play. We had that in 1985. You Johnny-come-latelys with your, ooh, it's new. It's like, you guys were the Mac. You were the Apple users of today, back then.
Yes, that is a fair point. However, for those of us using PC technology, oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah. Setting
jumpers, setting IRQ settings. Oh, yeah. Just so many things could go wrong. My family was not like a super tech savvy. My dad was not super tech savvy, but he was more tech savvy than the average Joe. I mean, it's just that he wasn't a hobbyist. He didn't know things in and out, but he knew enough that we did occasionally upgrade our hardware in our machine, add a little more RAM, add a new drive, whatever. And I just remember pre-plug and play every single time we did that. It was always a multi-hour ordeal before everything finally worked the way it was supposed to.
Oh, geez. Yeah, the few experiences I had with it, my first Wintel machine was a Windows 95 Pentium machine, so, I missed out on most of it, but I still had some components where, I still remember I tried to get an old joystick working, so I do believe I had to do jumpers once on the damn thing. And yeah, there was no reason it ever had to be that complicated. And
yes,
thank goodness it's not quite that bad today. Wintel PCs can still be finicky as hell, but it's not the nightmare that it once was.
No, not even remotely close. Meanwhile, on the software side of things, say goodbye to the interface.
CES showed a trend by developers of RPGs and adventure games to minimalist or even disappearing interfaces. Activision, Tsunami, Sierra, and LucasArts have all moved in this direction, giving players more screen real estate to explore with icons only popping up when needed or reduced to minimal corners of the screen.
Yeah, I mean, this is the multimedia revolution in full swing, and it's the multimedia revolution in full swing in a couple of ways. First, that it's possible to do these more robust GUI interfaces, but also that these companies feel that they can maybe bring in more of a mass market audience for this kind of software by all of these new consumers buying their fancy new multimedia PCs, if they can get the interface so simple that even grandma can use it.
There is something to be said for that, and here again, I'm a broken record this episode making references to the old interviews, but this is something that Al Lowe talked about when I interviewed him, where he said, the people who bought computers at the beginning, they were the kind of people who wanted to also solder stuff in it. They wanted to do all this extra work. Mm-hmm. And so an adventure game where you're solving these obtuse puzzles was right up their alley, because that's what running a computer back then was like. And now that there's a much larger, broader portion of the population trying to use these machines and using these machines, you have to accommodate them. So, people are not going to sit there trying to figure out which verb do I have to type in for 5 hours to get it to work. I've got 5 icons. If one of them isn't the right one, then, screw this. And so, it's partially the multimedia thing. It's partially, I think, also just the idea that we have to move forward. The games have to become more intuitive. And I think that it's still going to be a while before we truly get good design philosophy, as anybody who's tried to play things like King's Quest VII will know. But, it is an interesting development.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Konami abandons computer gaming.
GameTech has acquired the rights to distribute Konami's games on home computers, according to friend of the show and then Vice President of Product Development at GameTech, Gordon Walton. This gives GameTech 2 current and 25 back catalog titles. Konami will be concentrating on video and multimedia games going forward.
Yeah, the Japanese video game companies, console game companies, I should say, were always mostly half-hearted in their computer game support anyway. It basically started as a target of opportunity back at the end of the 80s because they were all making games on the 6502 derived NES, and so they might as well start porting all of their games to the 6502 derived Commodore 64 while they were at it. And then, they built out a little bit from there, moved on to other platforms, but it was always kind of half-hearted, and it makes sense that Konami would be pulling back from this now, I think.
Yeah, Konami had gotten a lot of their stuff ported through Ocean in the UK originally. That was, where you get a lot of the stuff like Green Beret and so forth gets ported through them. Grisor, aka Contra. But now that that's dried up, now that Ocean's not doing it anymore, now that the console games are just bigger than they used to be, it probably just doesn't make any sense for them to do it. I mean, screw it. They're out. I think Elite 2, they were actually publishing that. That ends up now at Game Tech for the US at least. It's kind of weird how Konami was spreading themselves out a little bit at this point in computer games. But it's just not their jam. And like with so much with Konami, as soon as the money's not good enough, they're going to move on. Just ask yourself, where did all the Konami games go? So.
Yep, that has been their MO through their entire history. Something I touched on in my Konami episode several years ago on my own podcast.
And I will put a link to that because that was a good episode.
Very good. But enough talking about the past. Let's talk about the future. Microsoft unveils their Mouse 2.0.
After 2 years of development, Microsoft has released their Mouse 2.0, the iconic light beige mouse with a rounded protrusion on the right side, which would become a standard bearer for mouse design for the better part of a decade. Yeah,
yep.
It's iconic. I mean, it's comfortable. It's the first big released mouse. It's not the first one, but first one that's not, symmetrically designed. And it was comfortable to use. It doesn't have the third button. It doesn't have the scroll wheel yet, but it is the base design that is going to be moving forward for quite a while.
Well, and it's just so smart on Microsoft's part because Microsoft is not a hardware company at this time. No video game consoles yet. And so one would think, okay, mice, why of all things is Microsoft a non-hardware company, getting into mice? But of course, the answer to that is they're pushing Windows 3.1. They know that they're going to be pushing Windows 95. They want to make sure there is a reliable, comfortable, ergonomic, relatively mouse available for all of those people that they are going to be pushing to buy their GUI operating systems. And they're hoping, which they are successful in, to create this virtuous cycle where people are buying Windows, so they need a mouse, so they buy a Microsoft mouse. And it just, keeps going like that.
Well, I mean, they did the same thing 10 years earlier, almost exactly 10 years earlier, just by a couple months off when they introduced the mouse that was going to come with their earliest GUIs. I mean, with Windows and with, what's the precursor to Excel called again?
Multiplan.
Multiplan, thank you. Yeah, so they've done this once before. They made sure that there was a mouse that was going to work with it. And, why not?
Absolutely.
And then later on, they're going to make some really nice joysticks. So.
Absolutely. And speaking of nice joysticks, thank you for lobbing that one over the middle of the plate, Carl. Get that real pilot feel for just $2,800.
I didn't even think about it. I didn't even know what the next story was anymore. Oh, well. Thrustmaster showed off new deluxe fiberglass seats and cockpit setups for their hardcore fighter pilot sim players. While the dials are just decorative in these sit-down minicabs, you can deck them out with an extra switchboard for just $1,000 more that will let you replace your unauthentic keyboard and slip into the role of a combat ace.
Military simulation fans, particularly flight simulators, were the original whales in the computer game industry. We're talking much smaller volume because this is a time when the computer game industry was much smaller and you were over the moon if you sold 100, 200,000 copies of a game. But flight simulator people were the original whales. They would buy any add-on, they would buy any mission pack, they would buy any accessory, joysticks, rudder pedals. There's a reason Microsoft Flight Simulator was one of the very, very first annualized release games, especially outside of the sports arena. They were the original whales.
They were kind of like Koei players. You could always count on and know exactly how many units are going to ship of each new iteration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, looking at pictures of these cabs, these are huge. I mean, this is the thing that's going to take up your den. But there's a part of me also going, "Oh, I'd love to give that a go. I'd love to give that a go." I wouldn't want to spend that much on it, but it's basically a more professional version of your sit down cabs, or it's giving you the same effect or the same appeal as a sit down cab in the arcades.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, it makes sense that this is happening for flight simulators because, I mean, this really was one of the most lucrative areas of the computer game industry. We're near the end of its run here in 1993, but it was one of the most lucrative, and it stayed that way until finally the amount of realism demanded by the player base was so expensive relative to the small niche that they became as games like Doom and real-time strategy games and whatnot redefined the market, that it was no longer cost-effective, and then they crashed and burned hard at that point. And now nobody owns fancy joysticks anymore. I have one somewhere hiding that I haven't touched in a decade. But yeah, I mean, they were the high end of the high end, man, and they would buy anything. Yeah. So true, so true. I kind of miss, I had one of these really cheap ones. It was a 9-pin where you could, it looked sort of like a flight sim, and even had this little see-through dial in the front where when you pushed it in, it would actually try to simulate the horizon. It was Oh, wow.
horrible piece of crap, but it was great for playing stunt car racers. So that's what it was used for in my home.
There you go. I played a lot of more space sims than flight sims, so occasionally flight sims as well. I never had a ridiculous setup. I never had rudder pedals or a chair or anything, and I didn't get the most expensive joysticks, but I had a flight stick, that was the name of it, which was a very well-regarded one, and then I upgraded it to a Flight Stick Pro, which had a few more buttons, and then my last one I got was a Logitech of some kind that had, a pretty decent array of buttons on it, but never anything crazy. But I mean, if you were a gamer, you had some kind of flight stick related joystick, back in those days in the 90s.
Had to. Come on.
Yeah.
Not gonna
absolutely.
do it with those damn keyboards. And you don't have a good mouse yet either, so there you go.
Exactly. And speaking of ridiculously stupid technology, tablet computing market gets crowded.
The impending launch of Apple's Newton may be overshadowed by competitors beating them to the punch. Casio, working together with the GeoWorks and Tandy, have shown off the Zoomer, a PDA that will allow the transfer of documents from the device to a PC and back and run many GeoWorks applications.
Don't worry, Apple. The failure of the Newton will not be overshadowed by the failure of all your other competitors. It will shine brightly with the strength of 1,000 suns.
Yeah, the Zoomer is an interesting little piece of kit just because of this compatibility with the GeoWorks environment. And GeoWorks still has quite a few. I mean, this is before Microsoft Office has completely dominated the productivity software arena. So there are still quite a few people at this point using GeoWorks. And so for them, this actually looks like a really cool deal. It's running, you can do your word processing and everything and then transfer it right back over to the PC. But, it's not going to set the world on fire, unfortunately.
Yeah, no. In this period, this kind of stuff only sets the companies on fire, not the world. It's a technology whose time has not come.
No.
But that doesn't mean we aren't going to try to get some killer apps going for it as SimCity goes mobile.
Maxis's city-building game SimCity will be coming to the PenPoint operating system used by a variety of pen-based mobile devices. The port will cost $69 and offer up terrain editors and use the pen as a control device.
All right. I got to admit, I haven't heard of this one.
Yeah, that's because I cannot confirm or deny that it ever actually gets published.
Mm-hmm.
So the publisher for this for this port, it was a company called Ink Development, and they may have dropped it. I mean, I've found some artwork of what could have been the box, but yeah, there's other mobile pen-based ports of SimCity. SimCity basically gets ported to pretty much anything that can run it at this point. Especially these portable things, because I mean, let's face it, it's seen as the game adults can be allowed to be seen playing. That's not, a card game.
Right.
But the PenPoint operating system, and I did kind of go down a rabbit hole with this one, it's this attempt to create a standardized OS for these type of devices. There's a bunch of devices that use it. But at the same time, as far as I understood it, I'm not an expert on it, it suffers from, the CPM problem of, it's theoretically the same operating system, but each device is changing stuff so dramatically with graphics and so forth that compatibility between the devices becomes very difficult, which may have been the reason here SimCity is... They're announcing it for PenPoint, but they probably would have had to make some serious changes for each new device that was going to get it.
Ew. Yeah, that does not sound like a good time.
No. Especially with the different resolutions, different refresh rates, and all this stuff would have just made a real pain in the ass.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if that was just dumped entirely.
Yeah.
But that brings us to the end of our computer game section. Moving on to some online news. AT&T wants to give Sega an edge.
We spoke last month about AT&T's plans to create a modem for the Sega Genesis. Well, at CES, according to GamePro magazine, they showed off just such a device. The Edge 16, a modem peripheral with a keyboard, would allow for online gaming on the Genesis. 3 titles ultimately get announced: Balls 3D, developed by PF Magic, which co-designed the Edge 16 hardware, Brutal Paws of Fury from GameTech, and Sierra's The Shadow of Iserbius. I
think it's Iserbius.
Iserbius.
Yeah, Iserbius, yeah, I believe.
That was the online RPG game that was on the Sierra network.
Yes.
Now, ultimately, the first 2 games would get released, while only Balls would still have the network code included on the card. And the modem itself would never get launched, being ready to go by late 1994, probably killed due to the impending arrival of the 32-bit systems.
Absolutely, and possibly also by the fact that AT&T was, specifically, they'd pivoted to the 3DO, and that wasn't going great. And of course, they had the Sierra network, and that wasn't going great. We talked about this previously because we announced, some of these efforts, as you said. But AT&T was really going for it there for a while in this kind of networked entertainment space.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been talking about it for at least a year and a half now, that the arcade operators are very, very afraid that the telecommunication companies like AT&T were going to muscle in on them, that they were going to just be do to games what piped-in music did to jukeboxes. And, why do I need to have this big hunking box eating up space here when I can have a tiny little unit that allows people to play games at their tables, in the restaurant, whenever they feel like it. And there's new games all the time because they're just coming down the wire.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, it makes sense that with that potential out there, that AT&T is really going to want to get in on that, and they're just shotgunning this. But the fact that they've got the hardware made, there's clearly a game that already has the network code built into it that's ready to go out to consumers. It really just feels like, something they just decided to drop it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that is not the only area of the online world that AT&T is attempting to penetrate, as AT&T also shows off Personal Communicator.
AT&T's bid to expand telecommunications was in full gear at CES, where they showed off the Personal Communicator, a cell phone fax touchpad computer using the Penpoint OS all-in-one device that will allow busy execs on the go to sign documents, send faxes, and receive calls all in one.
There's Pinpoint again.
Yeah. Like I said, again, I went kind of down a rabbit hole. I could have talked about a ton of devices using this month that were shown off at CES, but, at a certain point, you realize none of them are really relevant to video game history because probably most of them never got made. So, yeah. It's, this all-in-one device, they're trying to be a smartphone before there's the smartphone technology, and it's...
Yeah. No, that's exactly. Everyone thought that this kind of mobile device thing was an idea whose time had come, and they were all wrong. Or rather, they were early by a good 15 years.
Yeah. They're just way too early. They are underestimating the data transmission speeds that you're going to need. They're underestimating how poor the screen tech is. I mean, if you've used any of these these pen-based devices at the time, the refresh rates on the screens are so abysmally bad that they're almost unusable. So
absolutely. Meanwhile, Delphi enters online gaming arena.
Online service Delphi is the latest to enter the online games arena with its Game Room, which will allow users to compete against one another on a variety of games such as Microprose's Command HQ, New World Computing's Empire Deluxe, and a variety of shareware titles.
Yeah, Delphi here is kind of on the vanguard of something that would just very briefly be a thing in the middle of the 1990s, which is that, quite frankly, a lot of companies that were making multiplayer games, it never occurred to them that people would play them over the internet. They would have hot seat solutions, they would have LAN solutions, they would have null modem cable solutions, but nobody built in internet solutions, which created this vacuum that allowed third-party companies to come in and provide that service until finally people like John Carmack and companies like Blizzard got sick of all of these companies profiting off of matchmaking their games and went ahead and started doing their own matchmaking stuff instead, which kind of killed this short-lived third-party market. But
yeah, very true, very true. I mean, it's... And these are not small titles. I mean, these are just regular AAA. I mean, Command HQ is by Ms. Berry. We got Empire Deluxe. It's interesting, and the fact that they're adding a variety of shareware titles to the list. The idea that shareware is rising, and we've talked about this also over the last year. I mean, Wolfenstein alone, we know Doom is just around the corner. Once that hits, all hell breaks loose.
We are so humorous.
But it also means, you want to download it from Delphi, they're going to make that an option. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but you have that option.
Absolutely. And moving on to one of the also-rans in the networking space, Sierra signs deal with Prodigy.
Sierra has signed a deal with Prodigy, not the band, the online service currently owned by Sears and IBM that will allow existing Prodigy users to access the Sierra network for an additional fee. This comes after Sierra's deal with AT&T, which will hopefully provide the necessary additional funding needed to keep content development going on the platform.
Ah ha ha, good joke. Good joke,
Yeah.
Sierra. I just don't know how, after all that, they convince AT&T to take the whole thing. But,
you know...
I mean, I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. I don't understand why AT&T thought the Sierra network was going to work. Even, I mean, understanding that they wanted to get into the networked realm and all of that. I get that. But these are the people that do network infrastructure for their core business. And all it should have taken is one look at that single solitary T1 line feeding out from a group of networked PCs in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of California for them to say, oh, hell nah.
You know, I think that part of it had to have been just the headlines that would have convinced investors and other people in the industry that AT&T is serious about this, that they are going for... Because I don't think it was a well-known fact outside of Sierra just how makeshift and haphazard the TSN was at this point.
I imagine that's true, yes.
So, I mean, if you see the ads in the magazines, every magazine worth its salt has at least a 2-page TSN ad in it for the last year, which means if you are a consumer, if you're somebody in the industry thinking, well, where is this going? And AT&T, the biggest telecom there is, has just bought up the most well-known, biggest gaming network. You're thinking, oh, crap, this is going someplace. You know, who am I going to offer my game to for online play? I'm going to go and try to get in one at AT&T maybe and something.
Sure.
I think that this probably they probably thought, you know, we've got the resources. We can fix any of the problems. We can just pick up those servers, move them someplace else, and keep going.
Absolutely. And let's face it, I'm sure buying the Sierra network for them was basically just a rounding error.
Oh, yeah,
you know, in the grand scheme of AT&T's revenues. So
yeah. And it's kind of funny because just today I did an interview with Greg Barnett, and he had dealings with Sierra, and he gives a very interesting perspective of his first impressions of both Coarse Gold as a town and what he calls the barn where the TSN was. When that interview comes out, it's a blast.
This is why you need to be. This is why you need to be a Patreon subscriber, so you get these amazing interviews before everyone else can be the envy of all your nerdy friends.
Yeah, no. When we got to that, and I said, "Well, you know, what was Sierra like?" And he was like, "Oh, that's a good question."
Have I got answers?
Oh yeah. Now, it's. We're talking about this, you know, online gaming. It's in the air. It's in the air that this has got to be something, and it's so much so that Electronic Games Magazine has started a new monthly column called Gaming Online to just cover the latest news and new game releases in this upcoming industry. Okay, and I mean, we saw this a few months ago with Computer Gaming World added a whole section just on software updates, you know, patches.
Yeah.
And a column just on what's going on in the shareware market. It's this realization in the gaming press that the industry is getting more complicated. There are more subdivisions. It's not just buy a cartridge, play a game, buy a disc, play a game. There is serious subdivisions and new technologies and changes happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And terrifying. But only in hindsight. But speaking of that hope to get more content onto that Sierra network, NTN Trivia coming to TSN.
Sierra has signed a deal with NTN Communications, the company that runs the NTN network of online trivia games popular in bars and hotels. The Sierra network subscribers will now be able to compete with and against those playing in taverns around the U.S. and the world. So, if you've ever been to a Buffalo Wild Wings in the States, you have seen these little devices just sitting on the table where you can jump in and play games. And, well, that is now something you can also do over the Sierra network. And,
yes, indeed.
I mean, this, again, talking about coinop operators, this is the kind of news they really don't want to hear.
No.
Because, it's not only something that's already, stealing quarters away from them in the bars, but now, people don't even have to go to the bars to do it. They can practice and get into it. It's, yeah.
Yep. Fun fact, when I was going to law school, I lived right across the street from the original Buffalo Wild Wings.
Oh, really? Where's that?
Columbus, Ohio.
Oh.
And it's gone now. I mean, it was just in a regular, late 19th, early 20th century brick building, that the original location was in. And it was still there when I arrived. I never went in it. But they redeveloped that stretch of street, and that got torn down. And they were still in there. B-Dubs was still in there. And then when that was redeveloped, they built a brand new, massive 2-story Buffalo Wild Wings catacorner to that location as part of the redevelopment, which is what's there now. But
okay. Well, yeah, makes sense. I mean, you can't have, your original location look like the original location.
Right. So, little fun fact. And speaking of fun facts, let's wrap up as we always do with a few miscellaneous bits that don't quite fit anywhere else, starting with Virtual Vision brings TV to eyewear.
The Virtual Vision Sport is a headset that displays a small 1-inch TV screen image over a visor worn by a user to allow for portable viewing of TV content. A portable TV receiver must be carried, or one could also attach the visor to an RCA output. Yeah. There's pictures of this stuff online. This thing did actually come out, and it basically is just, a piece of plastic in front of your eyes, and then a little screen is basically projecting it on there so you see it up in front of your face.
It's not exactly Google Glass there.
No, it's not Google Glass, but hey, at a time when picture-in-picture was still hot technology, this isn't too shabby.
Absolutely. And meanwhile, in a moment of deja vu for me to a certain 40-year jump that happened not too long ago, Epix brings games to planes.
Oh, yes. Epix has licensed several of its games to In-Flight Phone Corporation, a company created by MCI founder John D. Gurkin, I think that's how you pronounce his name, which offers ground-to-air communications for in-flight telephony and data services. A handful of games have already been tested on the company's existing black and white LCD displays, and plans are to expand the system to color displays.
That was a beautiful German pronunciation of his name. But if he's American, I imagine, I have no idea how he pronounces it, but if he's American, he probably has some dumb pronunciation like Gekken or something.
Yeah, probably.
But I don't know.
Yeah. This guy, again, this was a rabbit hole I went down. Very, very interesting fellow. There's a link to the Wikipedia page about him, but he really did some interesting stuff. Started out as a radio repairman, then started building these tower setups so that he could strengthen signals for truckers on their CB radios. And when he runs into problems with that, because apparently AT&T has the monopoly on this. This is back in the days before AT&T was broken up. He starts MCI and tries to fight it. And he is one of the catalysts for AT&T getting broken up, or at least from the narratives I've heard.
Yep.
And then later on, leaves MCI. There's a whole bunch of back and forth there. And then he starts this company where he's setting up these towers on the ground so you have a continuous data connection, phone connection with airplanes around the country. And so he's selling, make a phone call from the plane. It'll cost you $10, but, you can make a phone call from the plane.
Yep.
And so why not add some games to that, since you already have a piece of hardware there with digital stuff in it, and Epix is going to provide that software.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And now, as is tradition, we will end with some random little obscure fact that nobody cares about but gives Carl a chance to reminisce about his glory days. Spaceship Warlock, shown at CES.
The Mac multimedia game Spaceship Warlock was shown at CES. This is pretty much just another forgettable multimedia game of the era, but it was co-created by Joe Sparks of Radiskull and Devil Doll fame, and that gives me a chance to talk about that amazing early Flash animated series, and, well, I'm taking advantage of that chance just now. Like
The floor is yours, Carl. I have nothing to add.
So, in the early days of internet video, when internet video either meant a blocky postage stamp or the amazing technology of flash animation, which allowed you to render it on the fly on the host computer, one of the great early pioneers of this was Mr. Joe Sparks, who at this point is still doing graphics. He also has credit, according to Moby Games, for designing the 3D model that would be used for the main computer sprite, the helicopter in Desert Strike. And so he's visual artist, but then he also does a lot of music. He does some weird country comedy music stuff. Website will be linked in the show notes. And of course, he did, for those who don't know, Radiskull and Devil Doll, very, very catchy tune with this floating punk rock skull and this tiny little cute devil doll who idolizes the Radiskull and wants to dance with him. And Radiskull is kind of old, so once he's done his rocking, he needs to go to sleep. And it's just funny, stupid, weird. They did about 5 of those cartoons. They even did a comic book back in the day. And when I saw the name Joe Sparks, I was like, wait, that name sounds familiar. And so, yeah, that's where we're at here. So if you've never seen Radiskull and Devil Doll, go check it out. Links in the show notes. Definitely worth it.
There you have it.
Woohoo! So that brings us to the end of the episode. Alex, you have one more task as the intrepid co-host. What is the word of the episode?
The word of the episode is violence in movies and sex on TV, because we are getting more and more stories talking about the overwhelming violence. We're getting more and more stories talking about sex, more stories about banning things with too much violence. This is getting to be a major story.
Yeah, and that's more than one word, but I love it. I love it. I would have also accepted Think of the Children. But
already did that one.
That's true. Okay, so everybody remember all the links to everything we've talked about, as well as how to get a hold of us. Send us your comments. Give us a like. Heads up. Subscribe on the YouTube. All that good stuff. Never miss an episode. Become a patron. Check out all the extra video content, and of course, always listen to Alex's amazing podcast, They Create Worlds. Link in the show notes below.
Well, thank you. And if I can take 1 second to plug it just a little bit more, please. We do have coming up in the very near future our yearly live stream where we do a giant topic, 3 episodes, 9 hours or so, back to back to back, all in one sitting, and stream it for people to watch as we make it live. And this year it happens to also correspond, and I do mean happens because we do not plan these things. It also will correspond with our 200th episode, which will be our December 15th episode. The third of those three we will be doing in the live stream, and so we're going to have a few special things going on for that as well. That live stream recording will be on the 28th of October at 11 a.m. Central Time. You can convert that into your own time zone yourself.
Excellent. I will definitely be trying to check in. What day of the week is that?
That is a Saturday, and I should have also, you can tell I'm great at promoting myself, I should have also mentioned that the topic for this ginormous streaming three-parter this year will be a broad overview of the handheld games industry, from the earliest Mattel handhelds up to the present, though with a lot of the focus being kind of, on the 80s, 90s, early 2000s.
Excellent. So get your Game Boy goodness on the They Create Worlds podcast, and I will also try to be there and say hi and talk shit in the forums with Ethan. So
excellent.
Okay, everybody, have fun.